Tonight at 10, more evidence of the growing pressures on the NHS due to the rising numbers of coronavirus infections. The London Ambulance Service says Boxing Day was one of the busiest ever days in its history, with COVID-19 adding to the strain across the UK.
Talking to trust leaders overnight, they are under no illusion about how challenging this is.
In Scotland, doctors say health services could be overwhelmed if there's a surge in cases because of Christmas. Also tonight, the rollout of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine begins for millions of people across the EU. Boris Johnson promises big changes for the UK following his Brexit trade agreement. And Storm Bella blows in with 100-mile-an-hour winds, adding to flooding chaos. Good evening. There's more evidence tonight of the intense pressure on the NHS as COVID-19 infections continue to rise right across the UK. The London Ambulance Service says Boxing Day was one of the biggest ever days in its history, with many calls due to the usual winter pressures but compounded by the coronavirus. And in Scotland, doctors say health services could be overwhelmed if the relaxation of COVID restrictions for Christmas triggers a surge in cases. The warnings come as the latest government figures show the number of new infections is increasing. There were 30,501 new cases recorded in the latest 24-hour period. But the true number is likely to be higher, as some parts of the UK haven't reported their numbers. 316 deaths were recorded of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test, taking the total across the UK to 70,752. With more on the strain on the NHS, here's our correspondent, Sangeeta Maiska.
Hospitals and other frontline services are under mounting pressure tonight in some parts of the UK. That's the warning from the NHS. The BBC has learned that student paramedics and 2 other ambulance services outside the capital have been called in to assist after a sharp rise in calls.
The London Ambulance Service says that yesterday, Boxing Day, was one of its busiest ever, with calls up by more than 50% compared to last year.
I never want to say that the NHS is going to be overwhelmed, because we see the NHS being endlessly innovative and ingenious in how it can actually manage to spread incredibly thin resource. But I think it's worth remembering that things are incredibly challenging.
Meanwhile, the Welsh Government has described the NHS there as stretched to the limit and working to full capacity. Annual illnesses, staff shortages and the rapid spread of the new coronavirus variant yesterday led Cardiff and Vale University Health Board to tweet this stark appeal. Our critical care department is urgently looking for assistance from medical students and other staff groups who've previously supported proning patients.
The art of proning patients, and that is about moving patients when they're in intensive care from their backs onto their stomachs and vice versa. And this process is quite heavy lifting. It involves 5 to 7 individuals.
Medical students and others answered the call in large numbers, and the Health Board later tweeted that while staffing remained challenging, the critical care unit remains open. In Scotland, clinicians are issuing more warnings, this time that the NHS could be overwhelmed. Mainland Scotland is now in Tier 4 restrictions. The new, faster-spreading variant, combined with the temporary easing of restrictions on Christmas Day, could, they say, have created the perfect storm for an NHS that is already overstretched.
Sangeeta, there are so many people hoping the rollout of vaccines will help with all this.
Look, undoubtedly, the National Immunisation Programme will have a part to play in solving this problem. We already know that we've got over 600,000 people in the UK immunised already. And of course, we've also heard the news today that the Oxford scientists are hoping that their vaccine will be approved this week for use. But Clive, this is a complicated picture. There are 3 factors at play that have created this pinch point. One is NHS staff themselves who've been treating COVID patients who've picked up the virus and are themselves either self-isolating or shielding. We've also got the usual winter illnesses that at any time will put pressure on the NHS. And finally, we have this highly infectious variation of the virus, which is now spreading across the UK. So what does that mean? Well, it means that in the short term, the NHS will remain under huge pressure.
OK, Sangeeta, thank you. Sangeeta Maiske there. And across Europe, the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine is being rolled out as countries, including France, Spain and Italy, begin their vaccination programs. More than 14 million people have been infected across the continent, and strict lockdown measures are currently in place in nearly all EU member states. Damian McGuinness has more from Berlin.
The European vaccine rollout has begun. In Berlin, mobile teams are taking the first vaccines from this distribution centre to those who need it most, the elderly in nursing homes. This airport once provided a lifeline for West Berlin at the height of the Cold War. It was closed down in November to make way for a larger airport, and now it's been turned into a mass vaccination centre, providing yet again a lifeline for Berliners, but this time in the fight against the pandemic. The first person in Berlin to get the vaccine this morning was Gertrude Hase, 101 years old.
I told myself that I didn't have to be among the first. I wanted to see what it was like for the others. But a little later I thought, come on, I'll do it too.
In Italy, where fatalities among healthcare workers have been particularly high, there was relief, as doctors and nurses were among the first to get the jab. And in Denmark, a moment of vaccine humour. Let's hope it works, says the doctor. If it doesn't, it'll come back to haunt you, replies the 79-year-old. In some countries, there are worries that not enough people will want the vaccine. So, to boost support, some European leaders have also gone first, including the Czech Prime Minister, and in Greece, both the President and the Prime Minister.
I believe that every Greek today is smiling underneath their mask. In getting vaccinated first, Greece's political and state leaders want to send the message that the vaccine is safe and effective.
Across Europe, elderly people have been isolated, afraid and vulnerable. Now they are the first to be protected. Damian McGuinness, BBC News, Berlin.
Boris Johnson has promised that big changes are on the way for the UK following his Brexit trade agreement with the European Union. In an interview with the Sunday Telegraph, he says he wants to focus on levelling up the country and spreading opportunity. However, some have accused him of caving into the EU, pointing out the deal doesn't cover services, which accounts for around 80% of the UK economy. Here's our business correspondent, Vivienne Nunes.
Glad tidings of great joy.
1,200 pages of detail spelling out Britain's new trading relationship with the EU. MPs and others are poring over the fine print. This morning, the Chancellor tried to dispel any fears the UK might be worse off under this new trade agreement.
For those who were anxious about the economic implications of leaving, they should be enormously reassured.
The free trade deal means that when it comes to the price of French cheese or Spanish tomatoes, there should be little change, according to the chair of the UK's largest supermarket chain.
The administrative costs associated with having to make customs declarations for people sending goods into the UK will be there, but you know they're very modest. I don't think it will make any material difference to the prices that consumers pay.
But the future isn't so clear-cut on other important aspects of UK-EU trade. Today, the Prime Minister told the Sunday Telegraph, on financial services, the deal does not go as far as we would like.
Obviously, we would have loved to have had more in there on financial services and professional services and services in general. It's 80% of the UK economy, 70% of the EU economy. But it's the norm for deals such as this, a free trade agreement. That they are focused on goods.
The Chancellor says the UK will remain in close dialogue with the EU on how things will work moving forward, including financial services. This is, though, the largest free trade agreement in history. It rules out added taxes on imports known as tariffs and quotas limiting how much can be bought and sold. But there will be more checks, red tape and possible delays when goods move across the border. That's better than no deal, but not ideal, says Labor.
This is a thin deal. It's not the deal that the government promised. And there are large areas of our economy, for example, financial services, that employs 1 in 14 people in our country, where there aren't clear elements within this deal, where much more work will need to be done.
Despite criticism, the Labor leadership will urge their MPs to support the deal in the Commons on Wednesday. Also this week, the government expects to sign a free trade deal with Turkey, matching the customs union agreement the country already has with Brussels. It's one of dozens of deals the UK has signed in the past 2 years. Most of those carry over existing trading terms from when the UK was in the EU. Vivienne Nunes, BBC News.
Let's take a look now at some of the day's other top stories. And a 15-year-old boy is critically ill in hospital after being struck by a police car in Stockport. It happened on Boxing Day as officers were heading to a report of a domestic disturbance. An investigation has begun. Police have been searching a house in Tennessee in connection with the explosion of a camper van on Christmas Day in the city of Nashville. 3 people were injured in the blast, and DNA tests are now being carried out after human remains were found nearby. Officials say they're looking for a number of individuals. The hugely popular American wrestler and actor John Huber has died. He was 41. Better known to fans as Brody Lee or Luke Harper. His wife says he passed away after a battle with a lung complaint not related to COVID-19. Millions of Americans have temporarily lost unemployment benefits to cope with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic after Donald Trump refused to sign into law a bill that would have continued the payment. The package, worth $900 billion or £665 billion, was approved by Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill after months of difficult negotiations. Let's talk to our Washington correspondent, Nomia Iqbal. Nomia, 14 million Americans are affected by all this. Why isn't the president signing this bill?
The surprising thing here, Clive, is that the Democrats and the Republicans, who usually can't agree on day and night, actually agreed on something really complicated, the stimulus package. But what's probably unsurprising here is President Trump's reaction. Because what can an outgoing president, who is clearly still aggrieved and angry at losing an election, do to remind people that he's still the president? Refuse to sign a very important bill that both parties want him to sign. His own Treasury Secretary helped to negotiate the bill. Mr. Trump says he wants more individual payments for Americans and less money on foreign aid. But while he's playing golf, up to millions of Americans are now having to deal with losing their unemployment benefits, and many face the prospects of eviction. But what's adding uncertainty to this as well is that with this package comes a spending bill which funds government agencies. So if Mr. Trump doesn't sign the bill, then there could be a partial government shutdown next week. Now, they could renegotiate the bill, but there is another way around President Trump, and this is a veto override. Congress would have to round up quite a lot of votes, 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate, to effectively dismiss Donald Trump's position. And if they do that, and the bill goes through and is enacted into law, then it makes President Trump something he really doesn't want to be, completely irrelevant. Clive.
OK, Nomia, thank you. Nomia Iqbal there in Washington. Well, the US President-elect Joe Biden has warned of devastating consequences if Mr. Trump continues to delay signing the unemployment benefits legislation. Mr. Biden will become the 46th president in just 3 weeks' time. Tackling the coronavirus pandemic will be his biggest challenge at home, but in foreign policy, he says he wants to, in his words, restore America's leadership on the world stage. With his assessment of the challenges ahead, here's our World Affairs editor, John Simpson.
America is back, ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table.
Now that Joe Biden's about to take over the White House and Donald Trump's moving out, governments right around the world are heaving sighs of relief.
I'm not actually walking into the real Oval Office.
This is an exact replica in a Norfolk film studio, much used by Hollywood movies. But when Joe Biden sits at that desk for the first time, he's going to be taking charge of a country whose standing in the world hasn't been as low as this in decades. Right round the world, there are fences to be mended and alliances to be built up again.
America is back. Multilateralism is back. Diplomacy is back.
That means taking the lead in NATO again after 4 years of complaints about other members, plus threats to cut America's contributions. And another major priority, rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, which Donald Trump said damaged American interests. Joe Biden hopes to revive the nuclear agreement with Iran, which Trump tried to kill off. Iran, the big European countries and Britain are all enthusiastic. Trump's one foreign policy success was getting 2 Gulf states plus Sudan to recognise Israel. Trump sided strongly with the Israelis and cut aid to the Palestinians. How easy will it be for Joe Biden to be able to change this? Even more important for him is how he'll approach Russia. The Russians meddled in the 2016 US election and seem to have hacked into some of America's most fundamental secrets.
There is a lot of unfinished business with Russia. I think together with the UK and with Europe, we're going to have to, again, sit down and decide what kind of serious signals do we send to Russia that its behavior must indeed change. We have max 4 years, probably 2 years, to really do things together with our allies.
And there's the most complex problem of all, China. What should Joe Biden's approach be?
Work with China, compete with them in a persistent and forceful and effective way, be prepared in the event there is conflict, but also be willing to cooperate with China on some critical issues that are right before us, like combating global climate change, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
At 78, time isn't exactly on Joe Biden's side. But for the outside world, he has one huge advantage. He isn't Donald Trump. John Simpson, BBC News.
Storm Bella has brought winds of more than 100 miles an hour to many parts of the UK, along with heavy rain. The Met Office has also issued yellow warnings for snow and ice, meaning disruption is likely in parts of Wales, northwest England, Scotland and the whole of Northern Ireland. Here's Chichi Izundu.
Storm Bella making her presence known on British shores. Winds of up to 106 miles an hour had been recorded on the Isle of Wight overnight, bringing down trees, causing damage to cars and homes and huts alongside Brighton beachfront. Train operators have issued warnings about delays and cancellations because of debris and flooding on the railway lines. But parts of the UK are still reeling from heavy rains over Christmas, like Cirencester in Gloucestershire. Residents trying to adapt. More than 70 homes were without power, and the Environment Agency has warned that some river levels around the country are still rising. This is Ducklington Farm in Oxfordshire, where farmer Helen's priority has been the safety of her animals.
The amount of rain we've had in the last few days has made it very difficult for us. We have over 3,000 sheep and we've had to move 1,200 of them in the last 3 days. So the whole of Christmas we've been moving sheep. They're all pregnant and their welfare is our priority at the moment. But finding dry ground is almost impossible because it's just completely saturated.
The Met Office had issued 3 yellow weather warnings about snow and ice in parts of Scotland, in particular the northeast, areas in the north of Wales and Northern Ireland. Officials say they're working hard to help those in need, but have added that there may be at least another day of harsh weather to come. Chichi Izundu, BBC News.
Now with all the day's sport, here's Jane Dougal at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, Jane.
Good evening, Clive. We'll start with the results from the Premier League. Match of the Day 2 follows the news, so if you want to wait, now is the time to leave the room. Liverpool have dropped points at home for the first time this season after drawing with struggling West Brom. Sadio Mane put Liverpool ahead early, but they failed to capitalise on further chances, and West Brom equalised late on with a header from Semi Ajayi. Liverpool are still top of the league. In the other fixtures, Patrick Bamford's penalty was the difference as Leeds beat Burnley 1-0. It finished 2-2 between West Ham and Brighton, and in the late game, Tottenham drew 1-1 against Wolves at Molineux. In rugby union, Wasps held on to beat Sale Sharks, but there was a lengthy delay as Wasps wing Zach Kebarigi had to be stretchered off with a head injury. Wasps trailed at the break, but in the second half, youngster Charlie Atkinson burst through to score his first Premiership try for the visitors. It finished 26-23. The Welsh Grand National was abandoned because of a waterlogged course. It's been rescheduled for the 9th of January, but racing at Kempton did go ahead with a shock winner in the Desert Orchid Chase. The two-time champion chase winner Altior had been favourite, but 20-1 outsider Nubi Negra took victory by 3.5 lengths. Andy Murray is to be given a wild card for the Australian Open 2 years after he made an emotional announcement at the same tournament that he was to retire from tennis. Murray subsequently underwent hip resurfacing surgery and went on to win the Antwerp Open 7 months later. He is a 5-time finalist in Melbourne and will compete at the delayed tournament in February. There's more on the BBC Sport website, including the latest on the Boxing Day Test match in Melbourne, where India lead Australia. But that's it from us. Clive.
Jane, thank you for that. Jane Dougal there. Now, before we go, imagine working for 80 years of your life. Well, postmistress Kay White has achieved just that and is now retiring in Shropshire at the age of 93. She's seen it all, from World War II to the wholesale transformation of the postal service. She's also been honoured by the Queen. That's it. There's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel, but now on BBC One, time for all the news where you are. Have a very good night.